Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Jan, I'm your course leader. Welcome to the live online event, very special event this time. We are having an evening chat with James. So James Shedberg, who's your instructor, he will introduce himself, but he has just been in one of the world's biggest game conferences in San Francisco. I believe it's in San Francisco, of course. I've been there too many years ago, but we are going to hear from James what is the hottest hot and what is not so hot in the games industry at the moment, and what the developers and publishers and people producing games are talking about. So this is a wonderful event to get the news directly from there. So welcome, James. I'm just basically going to give you the stage, and we have this 20-30 minute um, presentation, and then we take the questions afterwards and we can discuss. So welcome, everyone.
Okay, hi everybody. I am going to share my screen and go through a few slides and go through some stuff about GDC this year. And so, but first, quick disclaimer. I always say this in all of our talks, and the disclaimer is that, like Matthew on the course, I'm a live game dev, and so I've got a full-time dev role as well as doing this stuff for you guys in and around that. I am the head of studio at nDreams. nDreams is Farnborough studio, biggest studio in the organization. And, we're quite busy. And as well as that, I work on this stuff in conjunction with Sump University and with Jan and with everybody through this course. And one of the reasons we're so busy at the minute, and like anybody might bust through that door, is we've just released last Thursday. We released our biggest update to our game, Ghostbusters: Rise of the Ghost Lord, the Frozen Empire level update, which consisted of 5 new levels. There's Garaka, the bad main enemy from Frozen Empire, the movie. 5 levels, 3 of which were Frozen Ghost versions of existing levels we've already made, but with new objectives, new script, new narrative, and new characters that you can see here from the movie. There's Lucky on the right and Podcast in the background, and you can play as those characters. And really importantly, we've got Dan Aykroyd as Ray Stantz. He's in the game. He was a voiceover in our previous game, the Slimer Hunt. He's now fully in the game, interactable, and he takes you through the narrative of the game and links the game in with the film's narrative. And if you're wondering about his appearance, you don't do characters to look how they appear. You do characters to look how the actors want themselves to appear, because they have sign off and the ability to approve. And then before Frozen Empire, in January, we released Slimer Hunt, which was a big bonus game mode in our game. Where, as the title says, you hunt Slimer in a haunted mansion, darker and kind of spookier than the original game had been. And then just going back, we had a really, every month, new content, new characters, new game modes, because, Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord was a kind of games as a service, which is like, so many games now are a ongoing organic relationship with the audience and with the fans, aren't they? Yeah. And in fact, with this game, the initial game, some of the fans had some issues and some viewpoints, and they wanted to, influence and shape some of the content that were in the product, and we were all open to that. And the game has shifted into a more kind of fan-centric kind of proposal. And like you can see, and then, we had loads and loads of, weapons, costumes, game modes, new skins. And, you could buy that in the kind of season pass and all of the stuff that, games in the last 10 years, it's become like a real de Rigger kind of standardized thing. And yeah, and it launched in October. So we had a big push all the way to October, and then another push, because games are services more these days, and the release is nothing more than a gate to the next kind of staged release. And we also the Quest 3 was a MR VR headset, so we had like a mini puff themed MR mode where the mini puffs are in your room and you have to kind of interact with them, called Mini Puff Mayhem. And then before that, like in the summer, we released a game launch window title for the PSVR 2 called Synapse, which was it's like John Wick meets the kind of the Matrix, and that the narrative is Apocalypse Now meets Inception. So you're infiltrating someone's mind rather than going up the river to the Colonel. You're in the Colonel's mind in this game, hence the kind of surreal imagery and the kind of telekinetic force powers you've got, as well as the gunplay. And the kind of the high level vision for the character was that you were the Neo Jedi, Neo from the Matrix, but also with a Jedi's kind of powers as well. And it did really well at launch, got great reviews, really good sales on the PSVR 2, and is widely viewed as one of the key PSVR 2 titles that really showcases the hardware. And like it won loads of awards. There's some of the team members there, both in marketing and in engineering and in art. It won a Tigra Award last year. And then before that, we did a game called Fract, which again reviewed really well. That's PSVR 1. And then before that, we did Far Cry, which was a location-based game in that you go to a specific place and put on the backpack and the headset and move totally in 3D around the space. So you really feel like you're in the world with Vaz and the other enemies on this kind of tropical island. It was based around kind of Far Cry 3, one of the biggest, most iconic versions of that game. And so that's all the stuff that I kind of do. And the reason that, like, I'm here in the office still now, and people kind of walk in and we're very busy, but it's also one of the reasons that kind of keeps me, on the pulse, I guess, and with what's going on in development right now. And so GDC 24 a couple of weeks ago, and of course for me, many of the things that I'll be doing will be kind of business related, yeah. And these are little sneaky photographs. Obviously, I've blue screened any controversial material out of the images, but this is just like a sneak little look into kind of like the kind of business of video games, yeah. And I'm taking a sneaky photograph here. This is some of the nDreams highest staff in publishing, in business development, in development, and the guy there in the white checked shirt is Shuhei. Shuhei is the head of independent development for all PlayStation. So we'll meet some of these important people and we'll be pitching new games, or showing existing demos, and doing business relationships. This is Sony. So we had a morning at Sony whilst the conference is on, and you'll be touring hotels, the hotel rooms, and like and meeting rooms, and seeing this stuff. This is one of our little meeting rooms. One of our games is on there, and I'm about to go and pitch to one of the other companies, yeah. And then, as well as the actual game development conference, as the Game Awards, this is the award ceremony. Happens midweek. It's in the ground floor of the main Moscone Center, and there's thousands of devs, students, wannabe devs, and there's an independent award ceremony and like a People's Choice kind of award ceremony, yeah. And it's a great place. It's a great place to meet other developers, yeah. And if you there's that very old film Crocodile Dundee, yeah, where Crocodile Dundee arrives from Australia and he's in New York and he's never been in a city before, and he's walking down the street and he's just going, "G'day, hi, g'day, nice to meet you, like it, hello," and just like making friends with everybody because that's just what he does, yeah. And GDC is the perfect place to be the game development Crocodile Dundee, and I wander around. I'm meeting old colleagues, old friends, and you'll sit at lunch with a bunch of total strangers and just get talking. What do you do? What do you do? And like just make connections and other like-minded people who want to do the same thing you want to do, or give you some information about something that's totally different and unique to you. Yeah. So it's a great, great event. Yeah. And so this year, I actually with Cypherdelic bought an all-access pass, which gives you access to the expo and to the summits, which is the first 2 days of the conference, and to the main 3 days of the conference. Yeah, the main days of the conference are Wednesday, Thursday, and summits are Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, and on the right-hand side there, that's Moscone West. The conference is so big, there's 3: Moscone West, South, and North. And there's just a whole bunch of developers there. And there's the expo, which is in Moscone South, and it is an enormous kind of underground expo with every vendor, every software maker, all there, trying to get business and showcasing what they're doing, from Unity to Unreal, all of it. But interestingly, this is actually from 2023, end of the pandemic, but before a lot of the troubles in the industry with kind of redundancies and the kind of economic shrinking of not just games but of a lot of industries. And this is is it the same corridor? It's either an adjacent corridor, but it's the same building. And this is it this year, yeah. And so it was not as busy as some years have been, which just shows there is some economic impact in the industry still right now. But we think it's going to pick up, and when the new fiscal, which started obviously on Monday, when the new fiscal, which is the financial year, when that starts up, now is an interesting time to see how companies expand, grow, how deals are put in place and made. Yeah. And here's an interesting one. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't as kind of tightly packed as other years, but this massive long queue that is snaking around the block inside the conference to a meeting which was kind of broadly halfway up one of these sides, yeah. So the queue will be the same length again. That was for an AI talk, yeah. And I really, the biggest topic of the conference was AI, the impact of AI, the power of AI, the power of new technologies within interactive entertainment. Yeah. And we all got in. We all managed to get in. And so just to give you some oversight of what someone would do, like there are so many lectures and tracks and parts of the conference that you can't see all of it. One person can't see. There's maybe 20 things going on in parallel, so you've got to be really careful. And then if you're me and you've got business as well, sometimes you're going to miss some of the greatest things and make do with where your availability is. Yeah, so it's hard to plan when you've got a lot of business things happening at the same time. But the GDC Vault is brilliant. Every talk is on there after the conference, and you can jump in. I think students get free access. You can jump in and look at some of the stuff. Yeah, so this is just what I managed to do on Monday, and I didn't really get in and cracking until Monday after lunch. Yeah, so I went to the Future Realities Summit. I think I had like some of the summits. Oh yeah, so here is, sorry, I skipped one slide. Here are the summits. These are some of the summits that were happening in the first 2 days. Independent games, Future Realities. Future Realities was VR, free to play is obvious. And the AI summit, and AI happened all the way through the week. UX and game narrative. There was a lot on game narrative this year. And so on the Monday, Future Realities, I did a lot of stuff on, because obviously I'm in VR and VR was the future reality topic. And of all the talks here, the designing the cinematic VR spectacle, that was Shell Games, who did I Expect You to Die 1, 2, and 3. Good to see. The somatic design, putting the body first in XR, interesting, maybe not essential. An excellent talk if you are interested in art or art direction or design, was the art directing mixed reality and the art of Starship Home, which is this one here. And this game is all about turning your living room, bedroom, or kitchen into the bridge of a starship. And so you put the windows, the MR windows, on your walls to see out into space. You have airlocks that take things in and out of the world. You can see that someone is watering little alien plants that live in your room. And it was all about how you get the objects to sit in the world really well, how you do the art style to not like confuse the player. And you can see things like the frames of the windows, the thick frames of the windows, really making them like sit out and against the wall. And the fact that they're not like square windows, all these things were like really interesting learnings that the art director went through. And the art director actually gave away our art Bible as part of the talk, free to anybody. And I got that and downloaded that. And if anyone's interested, we can put that on the Discord, because it's very, very interesting. And MR is a growing thing. It's an interesting area. And so, yeah, I highly recommend that talk. And I will make the art Bible public to you guys. And then AI, the skyscraper zombies, that was the Call of Duty, and how they used, it wasn't really about advances in AI. It was more about how they use conventional AI pathfinding techniques to like handle massive, impressive enemies, like the kind of sandworm on the right and the Order, which is this kind of giant external zombie, and things like how it rotates without looking stupid because it's so big and you can fit between its legs, for example. And so that's a talk if you're interested in kind of like 3D gaming and with enemy interaction. I'd highly recommend that. Sorry. And then, yeah, the machine learning, this was a talk by EA, a deeply fascinating talk, and just goes to show the kind of technology advancements that are happening. And they were going through their new software where you can take a picture of any of your friends or any of your relatives or any of your loved ones, and you send that picture to EA's servers, and they have a software setup where that picture then gets modeled as a 3D head. Yeah, that's cool, but like photo telemetry and has been around for a while. Yeah, photogrammetry, I think, is the exact correct phrase. And so that's not new, apart from the fact they do it really, really well. But the thing they do that is really impressive, like if you see the stuff on the right and the left of the head here, like those are the blend shapes. And that's the rig, the facial rig on that character, which then animates every phoneme, and phonemes become words and animates the expressions. And they'll take your photograph, put it into their server, and minutes later spit you out an FBX file that you can put into Maya that has all of the blend shapes and all of the rigging, which would normally take an artist about a month. Yeah. And so, and the results are nearly as good as that artist would have done. Yeah. And so, the ramifications for that they're very interesting, aren't they? Suddenly people in your street scene, people in your bar, people in whatever thing you're doing in your game, smaller teams with smaller budgets can make more kind of complex content. Yeah. So it's a really interesting talk. And then I ended the day we're at the AI Summit with the art director and designer and of Little Learning Machines, which is a game on Steam where you solve lots of puzzles by AI training the AI bots within the game world to solve those puzzles, to pathfind better, to do routines, to solve puzzles. So really, really interesting idea. An idea to really kind of, in a fun way, teach people about like advanced large language data sets and, you know, all that kind of thing. And you can see the little jelly baby, jelly gum characters, you know, they have like their brains are the little cubes or crystals inside their little jelly heads. And yeah, you can teach them stuff and they learn and they evolve. And yeah, it was a fascinating look into how AI is changing games. Yeah. And then on Tuesday, again, this is the stuff I did on Tuesday. And so one of the really good ones, if you're interested in narrative, high production value, high budget gaming entertainment, like the narrative gameplay fusion talk of Jedi Survivor, really well worth a look and well worth like thinking about the sophistication people are now treating the narratives in games with, but not just the sophistication of the narrative, but how the narrative dovetails with and showcases the design, you know, really, really well. And so that I highly recommend. And then the VR comfortable car chase. If you're into VR, that was interesting. But the key one of the day is that game company who did Flow, Flower, Journey, and Sky, Children of Light. Yeah. This was a talk about fighting against online toxicity, but more than that, it was a talk by the head of the company about everything they're trying to achieve, their overall vision for what they want to do, how they want their games to make the world a better place, how they want to make mass multiplayer experiences without them all being based on aggression or conflict. And like, and 1 second, if I can, and yeah, and like, I highly recommend it. And like, you can, if you can see that it's available on every mobile, yeah, and I think it's coming to other platforms as well. And it's a very, very interesting product with a you know with a genuinely laudable aim. And like one of the kind of first points that Miss Chan, it's Chan is his surname, made in the talk was like, you know, it's no wonder you have online toxicity when the key mechanics of multiplayer gaming are conflict and aggression. If you've been fighting an enemy for an hour, it's bound to give you that heightened sense of kind of conflict, and it's bound to leak into some of your other interactions online, whether you know it or not. But if you've been engaged in an experience like this, which is much more about working together and communicating and building a better place as a group, it's going to hopefully have a positive impact on how people then communicate within that overall online space. So really, of all the talks that I saw, this was one of the most inspirational and inspiring, and really showcased the thing that Jan and I talk about a lot, which is have a vision. Have a vision. If you've got a vision for what you want to do, things fall into place. Yeah. Like the vision that I share with Jan is like fundamentally for what we're doing now, educate the whole world in the wonders of gaming. Yeah. It's very simple. One line. But that one line defines a lot of our strategies and then our objectives and then what we do. And right down to, you know, me after doing a whole day's work, being here and doing this, and not just doing it because I have to, but you know, being excited to do it. Yeah. And these guys, you know, they have a great vision, and I really, really recommend this talk if you get a chance to see it. Yeah. And then yeah, the gender exploration in VR, that was good. That was really good. I don't have any slides from that. That was about how exploring other identities in an online world can help people get adjusted to the real life identity they might have and be more accepting of other people's real life identities. Again, someone looking at the positive kind of things that virtual interactive experience can bring to people. Yeah. And then on Wednesday, yeah, the Evolving Layers of Social Gaming, that was a Discord sponsored one. Again, very interesting. The live service release planning for Destiny 2. Obviously, our game's a live service, and we've got to have plans for that's a space we're interested in. And it was interesting because what they do in Destiny 2 is no different from what we do, only on a bigger scale. And it was interesting to know that what we do is broadly right. Yeah, that was good. The AI revolution, that was an expert-led discussion. That was incredibly interesting, incredibly interesting. I'll come back to that later. And then I got the chance to squeeze into the Super Mario Brothers Nintendo talk, which again was excellent, excellent. If you are a fan of old school 2D Nintendo games, that's a must see. Yeah. But this is all more theoretical, so I didn't have any any kind of pictures for that one. But the interesting thing that you came away with was that all of the copyright issues around generative AI working from large language models will be swept away on the twin tide of people in the next generation. Everyone I'm talking to now, everyone just getting into games, just it being as natural to them as phones and the internet and the birth of computing was to me when I was 22, 23. Yeah. And they're just not going to care. They're just going to do it. Yeah. And on top of that, people like Unity and Google were saying that that copyright stuff is going to go away to some extent anyway, because they're building massive data sets of images that they own and data that they own that then people can AI algorithmically surf and get content from where there's no copyright restrictions or problems because the data set is all owned by them. It's a scary one in some ways because you'll have to pay them some money to use their data if you want to, but you got a sense that the kids storming the barricades, they won't care about that either. It's just going to happen. That and the kind of social mass multiplayer, the things that happen when those two kind of big forces collide, I think it's really, really interesting. And in that space, I think is where the innovation, well, one area where the innovation lies, which will really lift up interactivity, maybe out of its current slight slump. Yeah. Slight slump of it just costs too much money to make great, massive, big games. And maybe people feel games are getting a bit samey. So I met loads of people who I felt were like the next generation of game creators. Yeah. And also I drew those conclusions from the talks I saw. Yeah. The ones I could get to see. If I'd seen some other ones, other people did, maybe some different conclusions. But yeah, it was this. I felt AI was a really, the VR talks were a third full and the AI talks were jam packed. And then on Thursday, I had other business meetings on Thursday. So the redesign for Rainbow Six, that was an interesting talk. Because it's a very, very sophisticated game, getting a lot of information across. And then a really good talk was about this. I think what a slide of it. Yeah, Storyteller. And Storyteller is here it is on my Steam Deck. It is like a comic strip set of panels, and you have to get to the end of the story but all of the characters have like are AI driven, yeah. And so this is like the queen is rescued, yeah. So you pick the scenario from the bottom, and then you place the characters in the scenario to see. So if I pick kidnap, and let me see, kidnap, and there's the queen. I'll show you in a second. You'll see. And there's the baron. 1 second. I'll show you 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. And so I had to, the queen is rescued, yeah. And so I had to pick the scenario and pick the characters. I don't know if you can see that. And then you get to the successful conclusion, yeah. So it's using loads of multiple narrative threads to make, really fun content, which kind of gets people into narrative stories and flow, and they learn some stuff as they're having great fun. It took the developers 15 years to make that game, but it's very interesting. I really recommend it on Steam. And then the last talk I went to before whizzing off to do more business stuff is another Sky Children of Light talk, where they had over 10,000 players online at the same time, all interacting with this. I think she could be Swedish or Finnish, actually. Aurora, she's called. And it's just an incredible thing that you can watch it online, yeah. And they use their gameplay techniques to control what people were doing, to just kind of like how you would control people flowing through a shopping center or a McDonald's, or just trying to create some, just like in a real concert, in through this door, out through that door. And yeah, it's incredible and a real interesting thing to see, in the future. Yeah. And there's a random balloon that was tied to a post that, reminded me of the movie The Red Balloon. So I took a photograph of that. Yeah. And then, sorry, these are ones just what we're trying to do at End Dreams. Yeah. Our vision statements. Yeah. And that's, for example, is like my personal one outside of what we do within the XAMK with the SUMC work, develop amazing people, create innovation products, change the fabric of reality. That's like my personal one. Yeah. And yeah, that is, let me just 1 second. So yeah, that's my recommendations, the kind of key learnings from GDC. Yeah. On the business side, more interest, a sense of like us coming out of the recession slightly, a great thing. On the development side, just like another push forward on technology, both in creating content and, AI, that whether you are scared or not. And why be scared? Because we are a technology species fundamentally, aren't we? But AI really becoming a key part in the development of all of the stuff we do yet. And like the thing I've been talking to Jan about is, if you think about how the phone and the phone camera democratized photography outside of someone being a rich, skilled photographer to take those images, yeah, and how photography itself democratized creativity and image making beyond painters, and how it was only a few people and a few patrons, painters, sculptors, and the church for thousands of years. And then we had a different economic climate, basically starting off in kind of like Holland, and then we had merchants, and we had different topics because they wanted different subject matter. And then we had photography and the chemistry around photography to hold the image on a picture, which then democratized that. And that sweeping change kept going until we had the smartphone. And now anyone in the world who has a phone can take a semi-pro standard photograph. Yeah. And is that a good thing? I think it is a good thing overall. Yeah. Why not democratize the ability to be creative? And I think one of the plus sides of what you see at GDC this year is like the potential to democratize nearly all creativity and take it from the hands of the few into the hands of the many, just like with photography. Yeah. And that's an exciting thing, a thing that for people to think about, what does that mean? Yeah. What does that mean? And what will those products be? Like I worked on a Little Big Planet game that was trying to do that kind of thing, that like, you know, anyone could be a creator, and it worked. Yeah. But you had to make the effort and investment was still large to get something good. Yeah. Like what about if it gets so democratized by tooling and by AI that anyone can, like, you know, produce something of very, very high quality? Yeah. I think, like, you know, that's one of the interesting things I think that, like, you will see in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And that one of the kind of, when I got back from GDC, I got on the phone to Jan. I was like, that's my key learning. It's going to be amazing. Let's do an AI module. We must do an AI module. And Jan was like, we're already doing an AI module. I was like, so we are. I remember. Yes, let's do more. So yeah, that's that will be my key headline. That will be my key headline from GDC 24. And if you can get to the GDC Vault, like those talks are the ones I recommend. But like I missed, you know, I think it was like 30 years of Warcraft. Yeah, I missed the Diablo talk. I missed the Baldur's Gate 3 talk. Yeah, there's loads of other great stuff to see. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's it, Jan. I guess, like, do you want to put cameras on and go to like asking some questions and general chat while I turn the light on, because it's night. Night has fallen whilst I've been gabbing away. I'll be back in 1 second.
Wonderful. Thank you, James. Thank you, James. So before we take any questions, let's have a chat, a bit of chat, because you know that we are going to share the recording, so we can't take people's images and videos and present them. So I will actually, let's take a few minutes and take some of the topics you were discussing. I really like the idea when you said that the new generations, they don't care. You said like they are born with AI tools and they use them like they would kind of own them. It's very interesting what's going to happen with all this data, like you said, that for Google and those big guys, the fact that we are such searching for the materials is enough, you know, and then using. So they are building an IP license there that is never been done before, I believe. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like open, we call it GPT or any of those licenses that we use for developing piece of software too. I also like how you talk about the artist. I remember I was talking to this MP who was very worried and going asking experts that what they think of the AI, and it seems that I was the only one who was optimistic about it, because there's massive concerns, and we should like teach the creatives to understand, and it can be a beneficial tool for the future.
It's like nobody. It used to be that if you wanted to do a drawing, you had to make the paper. If you wanted to write a book, you had to bind the book and write it by hand. There was a time where there was no printing press. And when the printing press first arrived, it was Germany, wasn't it? Yeah. There were people that said, this is terrible. What about all the monks whose job it is to handwrite all the books? Yeah. And then you go, well, how ludicrous is that? Yeah. And like, you would never ask a writer to have to make every copy of the book that he writes. He just writes, and his words exist almost independent of the physicality of the medium. And therefore he doesn't have to think about all that stuff. He just writes the stuff. So the topics that he can talk about And also anybody can write, yeah. But look at the difference between Martin Amis, you know, Don DeLillo and me, and somebody's not even as good as me at writing. And so I just think like, you know, what's the, well, you know, when I first started making games, you had to make the engine and then you made the game. Yeah. Why? Who wants to do that now? We've got Unity and we've got Unreal. They do the engine and we concentrate on the game. Yeah. And so I just really don't think if you start using AI tools, you see what they're good for, what they're not good for, what they can help with. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be a thing that will make loads of people might have to retrain. There might be new jobs, of course there will, but I don't think it will make people lose, you know, loads of their roles. And then to be honest, when people go, oh, is it just going to be, it's going to be terrible, and you realize that their idea of AI is purely born out of watching the Terminator movie rather than anything that is real. And they're like, oh, but won't the AI suddenly go from being able to help you with your essay to helping you with some concept art? Won't it then just like become sentient and kill us? And you know, and I'm like, to be honest, like, could they do a much worse job than we're doing right now? Could they? If you look at what happens in the world and you look at all the ridiculous stuff that we do to each other and we do to the planet, and you know, we've been destroying the planet ever since we left Africa as kind of like Neanderthals and like Homo sapiens. I'm not an expert in anthropology, but like we've been wiping out things ever since then. Yeah, we're the great entropy engines of the planet, aren't we? Yeah. And so like yeah, I'm not a person that is opposed to all of these developments myself.
Yeah. You also talked a bit about the indies, the independent development and developers. So how do you see that world going on? You can relate it to AI or whatever you think is
I
the
think
best way.
like I mean like the difficult thing is when something becomes democratic and anyone can do it, it becomes more competitive. And then how you surface your game becomes more of a challenge, and how you communicate your game becomes more of a challenge. And like, you know, when we were starting out, there were so few people making games, so few countries who had the ability to make games, and you know, it was a smaller set of creatives. And now, like, anybody can make a game that they put their mind to it, which means you get interesting content, you get a lot of poor content as well. And so I think one of the challenges is like how you bring your game to the audience. So I think the community is far more important right now. Building a community, finding an audience, you know, finding people to engage with what you're doing, because a lot of stuff is very like bubbles in a drink of lemonade or a drink of Coke. You know, memes and cultural things are born and they pop and they're gone. And, you know, harnessing those things or finding those trends is impossible. So I think like, yeah, you have to have a communication strategy as much as a development strategy. And the key things of like how you stand out from a crowd are more important because there is more of a crowd. Yeah, so I think it is that's the key thing for indies right now. But then maybe it will be a bit of boom and bust, and you know, people will start to form bigger groups again. But like, yeah, the number of people making games, it is competitive.
Yeah, very competitive. It can be brutal at times, I think. But hey, so we have 3.2 billion people of 8 billion playing games. And this amount of 3.2 is going to grow, obviously, because every child who has access to games. And we are like, I really liked how you defined our mission and the vision we have to be educate the world with using video games creation, because find more modern and engaging way of teaching people new stuff. So we are doing, that's wonderful what you said. So I have one more question before we take the people's questions. Is that so? You were talking what is hot in the games, but I promised them to tell what is not hot at the moment in the games industry. What is like outdated or something that is not worth looking at the moment? Or did you get this kind of point of views from there? Or what is boring, or what is like not very interesting?
I do think that consoles are slightly struggling. I think Sony, Microsoft, not so much, but I think they are fractionally struggling. And the interesting thing was that, like, the PlayStation 5 and Sony, they were so ahead of Microsoft, and they still are ahead of Microsoft. And that console was so sought after. It was such a cultural object that people wanted. But I think they've struggled. They probably would admit it themselves. They've struggled to find like new must-have experiences that like really, really drive that console on. And I think if you ask a lot of people, they would admit that like they play their old games on it, and you know it's good, it's more advanced. But you know, PlayStation 2, GTA. Do you know what I mean? GTA, oh, you had to have it. You had to have it, yeah. And even on like, you know, 3 and 4, Last of Us, you know what I mean? And even end cycle of the PlayStation 2, the first God of War, my God, you had to have that game. And so I think because they've specialized a little bit in narrative games, big budget narrative games, which are incredible in many ways, I think, yeah, they haven't. I'm not sure that people have the same brand loyalty to them. So I think that I think they're from a fantastic start are slightly struggling because those big narrative games, they don't build a world that you spend a year or 2 years or 5 years in, do they? Yeah. And like, and things like those are the winners, I think, like the Fortnites and the Roblox and Minecrafts. Like, you know, they're almost like, I think of them as countries, almost nation states that exist across every piece of hardware. Yeah, I think they're the winners. I think VR goes up and down, and it has been on a bit of a down. Like maybe the new hardware wasn't quite as impressive as people wanted, was more expensive than people wanted, and the audience is skewing very young for those platforms. So that is a tough market right now. Maybe that will change. But yeah, I think the winners are those big nation state games that people spend big portions of their life within. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like Fortnite, you know, it's got Lego Fortnite now, hasn't it? It's free. It's really good. It's really good. And like, so if you have invested a lot of time into Fortnite, and I think social's so important, and all your friends play Fortnite, all your friends are into Rocket League, or, you know, and they become like kind of calendar dates within your life. I think, yeah, the big social, I think of them as, yeah, as nation state countries of games, I think are the winners right now.
I mean, that's very interesting. You're basically saying that I mean, not in your case, but if a game is like a narrative story, like a book, that is not so hot, rather than the open world games where you can spend years and years, like in World of Warcraft.
I think so.
I actually, I can say it is. I actually started to play Helldivers too. It's like Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it uses so much of the capacity of a computer that it doesn't run well. I can't
Oh.
play it. I can't see the game. So that's very interesting. So is there any new type of game you saw, like a genre, like when we got, you remember Temple Run? When we got it, it was a massive new, like a novel philosophy of video games, and then everybody wanted to make a runner game. Did you see anything like that there?
I guess that Children of Light, where you've got 10,000 people all in a space doing something that is like non-conflict based, felt like, you know, new things could come out of that. But no, I felt like those games were 2 or 3 years away. You can imagine a time, yeah, where Jake Gyllenhaal has licensed his body and his image to be in like digital experiences, and you, instead of having a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or a social space like that, you have a world that you can make. And it just like, you know, like Willy Wonka has his world in like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, yeah, and that people can visit that world and you can populate it with known objects. And like Jake Gyllenhaal will go, "Hi everybody, welcome to James's world. We're going to go on an adventure. And like, what do you want to do?" And you can talk to him, and like the narratives get formed organically from people's inputs and the responses from the AI agents within the world. Yeah. Like that will be interesting. Do you know what I mean? And then the types of narrative you can take part in will proliferate and change, and you know, you won't be tied to like conventions, you know, and yeah, I think that will be interesting. That will be an interesting time. But I didn't really see any totally unique thing happening like that this year.
Okay, that's also interesting news that just when it comes to type of games developed, that there's they're a bit struggling with the innovation in that kind of thing. And okay, good, wonderful. All right, so what's going to happen now? We are going to switch off the recording. So Lucia is going to do it now, and then we